talk about working your weak ties, which was the podcast topic for this week. And I really like this quote from Margaret Heffernan, who I'm a really big fan of. She's one of my, definitely one of my go-to gurus in terms of somebody I look to for inspiration and advice. And one of the things that she says in her book, Uncharted, is that we need to get a lot better at building relationships beyond the ones that we need right now. And one of the things that she observes in the organization she's worked with is that we have become increasingly transactional in our relationships at work. So we build relationships with the people that we need to get stuff done, and we recognize that's important, but we don't make time and space for curious career conversations, for meeting new people. And I don't think that's something where we kind of need to beat ourselves up. I think that's probably a bit of a product of, well, certainly over the last couple of years, the way we're all working, but also the pressure of productivity, of feeling like we've probably got too much to do and not enough time to prioritize these things. But it is an interesting observation that when Margaret Heffernan then did some research on the individuals that did the best job of finding their way through uncertainty and change, they had all got this in common. They had all got relationships beyond the kind of transactional ones they needed for their day job. So, of course, working your weak ties is useful for lots of reasons we're going to talk about. But I also think if you're thinking about taking ownership for your own squiggly career, the relationships you build belong to you. It's one of those things that we can control and that we can take with us wherever we go. So finding just a bit of time and prioritizing this some of the time, I think is really valuable. So I was thinking about, how do we describe the difference between strong ties and weak ties? And I think strong ties, it's useful to think of them in this way. So your strong ties are really important people, but they're people who swim in the same pool as you do. That's my person swimming. So we're swimming over here. So this is me, and these are some of my friends, and we're all swimming in the same pool. So we probably know some of the same people. We probably have some of the same knowledge and insights. We perhaps go to some of the same, we're part of the same networks or communities. And these people are really important. So what we're not saying is weak ties are better than strong ties. I think strong ties just do a different job to weak ties. That's how I would think about it. So what are your strong ties good for? Your strong ties are brilliant for support, for sponsorship, for they know you really well, so they can advocate for you. They are really good if you are struggling with your self-belief or confidence. If you're having a tough time, these people can help to build your belief. They can challenge you in ways that perhaps some other people can't, because they know you well enough to be very honest. And you can probably be very vulnerable with these people. So strong ties are still really important. It's just they play a specific role. And they're all, imagine you're in a big pool, we're all swimming in kind of a similar pool together. If you think about weak ties, some of them might still be swimming. And I may or may not have taken swimming analogy too far, but this is how my brain was working when I was thinking about this. But perhaps they are swimming in a different shaped pool to you. So perhaps they only do outdoor swimming, or perhaps they only swim in the sea. So you've got something in common. You like to swim, but you swim in very different places and spaces. And so you know different people, you know different things. Or maybe they're even weaker ties and they don't swim at all. Maybe I was trying to work out what pitch I'd drawn here, but this is not really a football pitch or a netball pitch, but maybe, I don't know, maybe they like to play tennis instead, or maybe they like to play football. So just think of weak ties as connections that these are people you are not close to. They won't know you as well, and they will know some different people. They will have new knowledge, and they will know things that you don't know. And that's why one of the reasons why weak ties are so important, because difference gives us new opportunities. Difference means we learn more. And when we think about kind of the three reasons why weak ties are so helpful for us, I think three things to bear in mind if we're thinking about why. Why would we spend time worrying about our weak ties, or thinking about when was the last time I developed a new weak tie connection? The first thing is that they help to build bridges. So if you're thinking, I'm over here today, this is me today, and you want to be somewhere different, or you want to explore somewhere different, you want to go to a new place, these weak ties help you to get there. They help you to kind of cross that bridge, because they might introduce you to somebody, they might suggest you join a certain network, they might help you realize you don't want to cross the bridge after all, which is also absolutely fine. But often if there's where you are today isn't ultimately where you want to be, or you're thinking about, does that bridge look appealing? Do I fancy going to somewhere new or doing something new? These weak ties help us. They end up being a bridge to new knowledge, new opportunities. Very specifically, we do know that weak ties are really important if you're looking to change direction. So if you're thinking about career change, if you're thinking about doing something new, if you're thinking about any kind of pivots, in particular, weak ties are useful, because that's logical, because if you think about it, your strong ties who are swimming in the same pool aren't as useful to help you do something new. So when I was thinking, for example, about running Amazing If full time, most of my strong ties weren't that helpful in terms of specifically and practically was I going to be okay at running my own organization? Because what most of the people that were swimming in the same pool as me had got is, what they could do is they could support me. They could all say, we believe you can do this, and this is why. And they could absolutely advocate for me, but they couldn't practically tell me what it was like to run a company, because none of them had done that. They certainly couldn't practically tell me what it was like to run a small company, because they all worked in FTSE 100 organizations with hundreds and thousands of people, exactly like I had. So when I was thinking about, do I make that move, that felt like a big transition in my career for me, I needed to think about, well, who are my weak ties? My weak ties are probably at this moment in time more useful in some ways than some of my strong ties. So if you're going to change direction, they really matter. And I think this is the reason why they're important for all of us. They accelerate our learning, because they know other things, and they will surprise us, or they spend time in different worlds to us. They will have different points of view and perspectives, and they're probably not reading, watching and listening to the same things that you are. I always find that interesting when you talk to someone and they recommend things you just think, I've never heard of, or I didn't even know that existed, or you just suddenly go, oh, that's fascinating, I'd love to find out more about that. But that point about you don't know what you don't know. I think what weak ties do is you think, I don't know what I don't know, and then suddenly you realize, oh, now I know what I don't know, because I've spoken to a weak tie and they've said, oh, have you heard about this thing? And you think, well, no, but now I know that I don't know, I can go and do something about it, and I can accelerate my learning. So weak ties are really important. Just thinking about for you now in your career, we're just going to use annotation for this. I always think it's important to be specific about what's a priority for you right now, because we can't do all the things that we talk about on the podcast every week all of the time. We have to think about, how important is this for me and my development in my squiggly career at the moment? So I'm interested to know from all of you, just using the annotation, on a scale of 0 to 10, how important does working your weak ties or developing your weak ties feel to you right now, based on everything you've just heard me talk about? 10 being, it's the most important thing for me to spend my time on right now. 2 or 3 being, okay, yeah, I can see why this is important, but maybe not top of my list at the moment. There's no right or wrong. Just interesting, I think, for us to see as a group, and a good question to ask yourself for every topic that we cover. Because there's so much we all could do, but you have to make some decisions and some choices about what to do. Also, I was just interested in the answer to this question. And never leave this too late. I think I've left this too late a couple of times in my career, where I sort of had almost got lulled into that comfort blanket of strong ties and just not spent enough time with new people in new places. And then every time I have done that, it's opened up so many opportunities. So never leave this too late. I've got one particular moment in my career I can really pinpoint that I should have done this a bit earlier, and it would have really helped me. Okay, so we've got a range. We've got quite a few people around the kind of 8 and 9 going, yeah, this feels important. And then let me know in chat now, why is this important for you? So are we thinking career changes? Do you want just new knowledge? Do you just want to spend some time with new people, having maybe, because of the pandemic, feel like your world has got a bit smaller? Certainly for me, I feel like I've had to rediscover how to do some of what we're going to talk about, because of how we're all working. So again, just interested to know. You can share anonymously if you prefer, or you can just share with everyone. It's usually a pretty supportive community, but I do know sometimes people join from the same organisation. Okay, Dan, so yeah, you're in a new organisation, so there's a lot of weak ties, yeah? And some of those you'll probably want to convert into strong ties at some point, I'm sure. Mentoring, coaching, Olga, great. Career options, business development, yeah, good point, Emma. That's actually something I'd not thought about, but you're right, depending on the job that you do, it is a really good way of doing business development. Mentoring, exploring side steps. Great. And just staying in chat for a second, what makes this hard? Or what hinders you? Or why does this feel like something that maybe we don't always do at the moment? Interested in the barriers. What are the barriers to working your weak ties? And then I hope I've got an idea for action that will help those barriers that we're going to talk through. Eliza, okay, you're worried that people won't want to talk to you. Time limitations, lack of time, shy. Fear of rejection, appearing pushy. Okay, yeah, getting over the initial hello. So, okay, we've got there's some mindset and there's some skill set points already coming up. The mindset point about fear of rejection, people are really busy, don't want to appear to be pushy, and probably some like mindset, skill set, how do I ask, and some really practical things like just making the time, like choosing to do that. Too much work, difficult to keep up, even, yeah, interesting. So you've got to work on your strong ties as well. Where do you start from? Okay. So now for a second, I want us to just do a tiny bit of imagining. So if you think about this community here today, we are all relatively weak ties. You might know some people in this community, I don't know, but most of us don't work together day to day. We're sort of here because we like learning and we like career development. So we've sort of got that in common, but we probably all swim in slightly different pools. We're sort of all in quite different worlds. When we kind of get together on a third, we don't really talk about the jobs that people do or exactly what the backgrounds that we all come from in terms of our careers or our job titles. So we are all relatively weak ties, I would suggest. And now I want you to imagine that I come to any of you to ask for some help or ask a question a bit more. I'm interested in what you do. I want to kind of understand a bit more about what you do. Maybe I'm thinking about making a career change into the world that you're in right now. Maybe I just want to learn. Maybe I figure out that Dan's doing something, I think, oh, I'd like to learn a bit more about that. Or Laura's doing something where I think, well, that's interesting. I don't know anything about that world. I wonder if Laura would chat to me for a bit. So imagine I'm coming to you now and I've asked you that question. Something along those lines. I either want to learn from you or I'm just interested in what you do. Let me know in chat, how would you respond to that ask from me? I've emailed you, I've messaged you on chat. How are you going to respond to that? Be really honest. If you think, no, thank you, I'm really busy, that's fine too. But so far, Steve's going to meet me for coffee for 30 minutes. Thanks, Steve. Lucy's flattered. Dan's like, yeah, sure. And I know we're a very supportive community, but Anya's going to set up an opportunity for us to chat. Let's connect. Totally for it from Olga. Okay. So just remember that. So I'm about to talk about some very practical ideas for action, but in terms of that mindset point about kind of what stops us from doing this, all of you have just told me exactly how you will make other people feel when you do this. So never and I'm introverted, I get nervous meeting new people, particularly new people. And I always try to remind myself that when I do this, that this is how I'm giving someone the opportunity to feel. And it just nudges me and tips me into making sure I take action. So never let those kind of fears get in your way. And if you do get a rejection or a no response, which does happen sometimes, someone is too busy or you just don't get anyone, someone doesn't come back to you, never take that personally. Excuse me, never take it personally, because you never know what's going on in someone else's world. And always ask, you don't need to only ever ask one person, always ask a few people and increase your chances of success. So what I thought I would do now is I'm going to talk about 6 ways, really practical, short, specific ways that you can work your weak ties. And then I'm going to ask you to vote for your favourite and let me know if you've got any other ideas that I've missed that you can share with the group. So this is probably my favourite way, this first one. I don't think it's cheating, but it's a little bit cheating. I'm much more comfortable with my strong ties than I am my weak ties, because they're people you know really well, and some of them even feel like friends. So the first thing that you can do is use your strong ties to get new connections to weak ties. I think I can't remember if I mentioned it in this workshop, but I met a previous manager a couple of weeks ago, and I was very specific about asking her for introductions to people that she knew that have started and are running growing small businesses that are sort of about 5 years ahead of us in terms of how long they've been doing it for. So I was very clearly using a strong tie to get some new connections to weak ties. And I think there are 4 people that she mentioned that I sort of went, yes, please, yes, please. And then I reminded her, and then she's on the case getting those introductions. And all of a sudden I've got 4 new people to talk to who she's going to introduce me to. And I find an introduction much easier than kind of a cold ask, though we will come on to the cold ask. So don't forget to ask your strong ties for help in terms of if you want to learn about something, or if you want to get experience or exposure to something, ask your strong ties to help you, and be specific about what it is that you're looking for. Again, most of us are really happy to help if we can. And don't assume, sometimes we don't ask our strong ties because we think they won't know someone. You never know who people know. It's amazing when you start to be explicit about the help that you need, when someone says, oh yeah, my sister runs that company, or my friend's best friend happens to be a nurse, and you're interested in going into nursing. And so just always ask. And because the worst thing they can say is, oh, I don't think I actually know anyone. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. So use your strong to get to weak ties. Another one that I think, again, is probably a bit less scary than the cold ask is a reconnect. Sometimes we don't reconnect because we think, oh, well, I've not spoken to that someone in a couple of years, or does it feel a bit awkward to go back to someone who I've not kept in touch with? Again, most people are really happy to hear from you, and they'll be really curious as to what you're up to, how they can help. So is there a colleague that you used to work with 3 or 4 years ago that you actually got on really well with, and they've gone off and they're doing something you're really interested in? Reconnect with them. This is where things like LinkedIn are really helpful, because I get people reconnecting with me on LinkedIn because they probably wouldn't know my email address, and they'll just message me and just say, oh, we worked together at Barclays, or oh, we were actually at Boots at the same time. Usually it takes me a minute to I've got a rubbish memory, and I kind of connect the dots, especially when people have changed their names. And then I think, oh yeah, okay. And maybe they're getting in touch because they've read Squiggly Career, they've listened to a podcast, or they're just interested in something. They're just asking a question. I've never once thought when someone's reconnected, how dare they not be in touch with me for the last couple of years? I just thought, oh, that's nice. And that's it. Next one, think about what you could say yes to that you might normally say no to. This really helps me. So there are sometimes things that come your way. So it might be the opportunity to get involved in a project, to volunteer for something, to go to an event, whatever it might be. And you think, I'm too busy. We do the time thing. We think I'm too busy to do that. And so we say no. What I sometimes do is look at those opportunities through the lens of, will they help me to potentially make some new connections with weak ties? And if the answer to that is yes, I then think maybe I should say yes rather than no. So sometimes I very intentionally say yes to something because of the weak ties point. And again, because I'm an introvert, the last thing I really want to do is have to do like a cold ask or do something from scratch. I would much rather go to something that already exists, or where people already are, where I'm going to get the chance to meet some new people. I think I've talked before in a Pod Plus session about, I recently did some learning on sustainability in business. And partly because I'm interested in the topic, and we'll talk about that in a second, but partly because I thought, oh, I'm going to meet 5 or 6 people, only quite a small group, 5 or 6 people who will all be weak ties. So I'm going to get the dual benefit of learning and some new connections that would just be interesting for an area where I've got kind of a shared passion. So again, would have been really easy to say no to that. It's not part of my day job. It's not a priority in terms of my day job, but I said yes rather than no. Obviously, be discerning. Don't do this all the time, but it's just a good lens to look at things through. Would it help with your weak ties? Next one is about this point about learning and following your curiosity. If you're thinking, I think someone put in the chat about where do I start with working my weak ties? Start with what you are curious about, or start with what's your learning objective at the moment. If I was to ask you, what's the thing you want to learn more about in 2022? What's the thing you want to get better at next year? Where do you want to stretch your strengths? How do you see yourself growing next year? Or just what are you really passionate about? What are you really interested in or intrigued by? And use that as the starting point to create new connections to work your weak ties. So it's almost less about the people and more about the what. So it's more about the what than it is the who, but you're using the what to create those connections and to get new who's as part of your career community. And again, sometimes this feels more comfortable for us because there's a very specific why. Like, why am I doing this? Because I'm interested in that area. I could say, because I'm interested in sustainability, I'm going to go and do this course, or I'm going to go and do this learning or go to this event. Oh, and then there's an added advantage of a who where I might create some new connections, but I'm interested in the content either way. So that worked really well for me. This one, I could only think of one example where I'd done this. And to be fair, it did work, but Helen does it all the time. So in the spirit of balance, I thought I would include it. And also, if you read some of the articles on this, everybody mentions it, which is use social media. Use social media to work your weak ties. Now, whether this is more of an introvert extrovert thing, I don't know, but I'm pretty unlikely to create new weak ties kind of cold through social media. Just doesn't feel that comfortable to me. So therefore, I'm less likely to do it. I have done it on LinkedIn a few times where I've read someone's work and I've thought I would really like to speak to them. And I've messaged them on LinkedIn as a connection and been very clear about, I read your work on X. I'd be really interested to find out more if you have time for a conversation. So I have done it a few times. And interestingly, every time I have done it, everyone has said yes. And it's not because they're not getting anything in return. I've not then said, because you can come on a podcast or anything like that. I've just said, your work is interesting and I'd like to learn more. So I think I don't find that as easy. Some people are brilliant at it. Helen is brilliant at it. She, particularly on Instagram, she'll message people, she'll create really good connections, and it works really well for her. So some of these will feel more comfortable than others. So just pick the ones that work for you. I don't think I'm going to be an Instagram influencer anytime soon. I think it's fair to say. And then just start to practice the kind of art of asking. If you've not seen Amanda Palmer's work on the art of asking, Amanda Palmer, she's sort of like an all-round creative, very different to our world, probably that most of us are in. So she does things like, she's done stand-up mime, she has a band, she does writing. She's really interesting to follow on Instagram, but she did a TED talk on the art of asking and then wrote a book about the same topic. And I think one of the skills we have to get better at to be able to work our weak ties is practice asking in a way that works for you. And so just think about, of all the things that we've talked about, what ask feels most comfortable for you. And I think the more that we ask, the kind of point I wanted to kind of make on asking is the more we do it, the easier it gets. So the first time we do it, it probably feels a bit uncomfortable. But then the next time it gets that little bit easier, and the next time it gets a bit easier. And I have done so much asking now, I think as part of Amazing If, it's sort of part of what we do is, we'll ask people to come on the podcast. I've also got much more used to rejection. Loads of people say no, or don't even respond. Like, there are loads of examples I could give you of where even some people I know who just don't even respond, or people who you really think will say yes, say no. And you just get really used to going, oh, as long as you've asked in a way that feels good to you and you feel like it's a reasonable ask, if someone says no, that's absolutely fine. So it is one of those, the more you do it, I think the easier it gets. And it's not something that either Helen or I actually find that easy, but I think because we've both had to practice it, you get used to the yeses, but you also equally get used to the no's and realize that's okay too. Appreciate I'm not keeping up with the chat. Yeah, good. That's a really good point from Lucy there. If you've got a reason to get in touch, that's always really nice, like alumni, or you've been in the same company and those kind of things. So quick vote before we finish. Which of those ideas would you be most likely to go and do after today? So use your strong ties for weak to get to your weak ties. So strong to weak, a reconnect, saying yes to something you might normally say no to, following your curiosity, thinking a bit more about how you could use social media, or just practicing more frequently the art of asking. Yeah, Steve, do you know what? We've never quite cracked how to connect everybody here other than we turn up and just go, here's some interesting stuff. So maybe that should be one of our ambitions as a group for next year, is how can we also connect all of you in a way that works? So maybe it is on a LinkedIn group. We don't really want to create anything separate because I don't want to create more work for people or a different platform. So something like LinkedIn is a good idea. If anyone would like to volunteer to figure out what would be good and to test something, then we'll be really happy to help. Yeah, and we've never quite worked that bit out, but I think it's a really good idea. We've got a range of votes for the different ideas this morning. A few options: annotate, stamp, and then star, heart, cross, arrow, whatever feels good for you this Thursday morning. Cool. Lovely. That's everything for today. We've just got to 9:30. I hope it's been a useful session on working your weak ties. I am desperately trying to remember what we're covering next week, and I can't remember. We're definitely going to talk about self-awareness in the next couple of weeks, but I don't think that's next week. I think we've got one more week and then we're going to do self-awareness. We've also got some really good ideas to inspire guests to end the year as well, which we're just recording at the moment. But thank you all so much for joining. I hope it's been practical and useful, and see you all next week, hopefully.